Just checking to hear if my audio is working. Can anyone hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I can hear you.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So does this mean I have a few minutes to run upstairs real quick?
You certainly do.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. And by the way, good evening, everyone.
Good evening, sir.
Madam Chair, we do have a quorum, so whenever you are ready to start the meeting at 7, it appears that we are good to go.
Sounds good. We'll just give it 2 more minutes and we'll get started. Christine, I just need 1 more minute, just waiting on one thing.
Okay.
Okay, I am now ready. Are we good to go?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, excellent. I will now call this meeting to order. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic and related state of emergency, and as set forth in the Commission's Resolution 20-05-01 from the May 7th, 2020 meeting, we are meeting remotely again this month. The public access is being provided by live streaming the meeting on PRTC's YouTube channel. This information was on PRTC's website, Facebook page, and at the Transit Center, as well as being advertised in Inside Nova and the Freelance Star. We will follow the same meeting process as before. Please state your name when speaking. I will introduce each item, then ask for a motion in a second. I will repeat the names of who made the motion and the second. I will then ask each jurisdiction if there are any comments or questions from their representatives on the item. I will then ask Christine Rodrigo to take the vote by roll call. Commissioners who need to leave the meeting should verbally advise me prior to leaving so the time can be reflected in the meeting minutes. And with that, we will now go to the invocation and pledge of allegiance. Will you please bow your heads? Lord, thank you for the opportunity to meet again, to do what's in the best interest of our community. I ask that you give us knowledge and wisdom as we move forth in setting our agenda. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. We will now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Christine, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Before I get started, we have someone who has joined from a phone number. The last 4 digits are 0001. Can that person identify themselves so we can be sure that you're part of our meeting? The last 4 digits are 0001.
Madam Chair, it appears that Mr. Kalai is trying to speak, but there's no audio coming out.
Okay. Kalai, you can't speak, right?
Hi, I'm sorry. It's Kalai Kandasamy.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, starting on the roll. Victor Angry,
Present.
Andrea Bailey, Kenny Bodie,
Present.
Margaret Franklin,
Present?
Janine Lawson, Yesli Vega,
Here.
Pete Canland, Maggie Hansford, Kalai Kandasamy,
Here.
Kim Short,
Here.
and Benny Smith. I know I saw Mr. Smith.
It's muted.
Okay, but Mr. Smith is here, right?
Yes, I am here.
Okay, wonderful. And Ann Wheeler. Okay, because we have Commissioner Bailey and Commissioner Lawson are not with us this evening, Benny Smith and Kalai Kandasamy will be serving as voting members this evening from Prince William County. From Stafford County, Tanisha Allen,
Here.
Cindy Shelton,
Here.
Meg Bumke, Thomas Cohn. From the city of Manassas, Pam Sebeski
Here.
and Ralph Smith.
Present.
Because Ms. Sebeski is with us, Mr. Smith will be a non-voting alternate. From the city of Manassas Park, Jeanette Rischel,
Here.
Preston Banks, Alana Mensing,
Here.
and Daryl Moore.
Here.
Because Mayor Rischel is with us this evening, Commissioners Mensing and Moore will be non-voting alternates. From the city of Fredericksburg, Matthew Kelly.
Here.
And Jason Graham. From Spotsylvania, Deborah Frazier,
Here.
Gary Skinner,
Here.
Tim McLaughlin, David Ross. From the DRPT, Jennifer Mitchell, Jennifer DeBrule,
Here.
Todd Horsley, and Steve Pittard. And from the House, Lee Carter, Elizabeth Guzman,
Here.
and from the Senate, George Barker. I believe I saw Senator Barker, right?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Madam Chair, we do have a quorum.
Thank you. We'll now move into item 4.1, approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Vic
Moved
Angry.
by Supervisor Angry. Is there a second?
Second, Supervisor Vega.
Seconded by Supervisor Vega. Are there any questions from Prince William County? Stafford County,
None.
City of Manassas, Manassas Park,
None.
Fredericksburg,
None.
Spotsylvania, DRPT,
None.
General Assembly.
None.
Christine, will you please call the roll?
Victor Angry,
Aye.
Kenny Bodie,
Aye.
Margaret Franklin,
Aye.
Yesley Vega,
Aye.
Kalai Kandasamy,
Aye.
Benny Smith,
Here.
Tanisha Allen,
Aye.
Cindy Shelton,
Aye.
Pam Sabeski,
Aye.
Jeanette Rischel,
Yes.
Matthew Kelly,
Yes.
Deborah Frazier. I didn't hear a vote for Deborah Frazier.
Aye.
Gary Skinner,
Aye.
Jennifer DeBrule,
Aye.
Elizabeth Guzman,
Aye.
and Senator Barker.
Aye.
Madam Chair, that resolution is approved.
We'll now move into item 5, approval of the minutes. Is there a motion?
So moved. Big Angry.
Moved by Supervisor Angry. Is there a second?
Second, Supervisor Vega.
Seconded by Supervisor Vega. Any questions from Prince William County? Stafford County,
None.
City of Manassas,
None.
Manassas Park?
I wish to abstain, Madam Chair. I was not at the last meeting.
Thank you. Fredericksburg,
No questions.
Spotsylvania,
No questions.
DRPT,
No questions.
General Assembly. Christine, will you please call the roll?
Victor Angry,
Aye.
Kenny Bodie,
Aye.
Margaret Franklin,
Aye.
Yesley Vega,
Aye.
Kalai Kandasamy,
Aye.
Benny Smith,
Aye.
Tanisha Allen,
Aye.
Cindy Shelton,
Aye.
I'm sorry, was that a vote from Cindy Shelton? I didn't quite hear it.
I'm sorry, that was an aye.
Thank you. Pam Sabeski,
Aye.
Jeanette Rischel,
Abstain.
Matthew Kelly,
Aye.
Deborah Frazier,
Aye.
Gary Skinner,
Aye.
Jennifer DeBrule,
Aye.
Elizabeth Guzman,
Aye.
and George Barker.
Aye.
Madam Chair, that resolution is approved.
Okay, we'll now move into item 6, the VRE CEO's time. I'll now turn it over to Mr. Dalton.
Thank you, Chair Franklin, and good evening, Commission members and others. You do have the CEO report in your packet, 6.1, and the January 2020 update memo, which is attachment 6.4.1. So I'll just speak to the highlights. VRE continues to operate at a reduced service level, referred to as our S plus schedule. We continue to manage and enhance the health and safety measures implemented system-wide in 2020. As information, VRE implemented a mandatory requirement for all riders to wear a face covering on board VRE trains and at VRE stations in May of 2020. Recently, a federal mandate, which was effective February 1, also requires masks to be worn on board VRE trains and at stations, and we are in full compliance. For the month of January, we continue to see daily ridership at approximately 1,000 average daily riders a day. In addition to New Year's Day and Martin Luther King Day on January 18th, VRE did not operate service on January 19th and January 20th due to the heightened security posture in the district during the presidential inauguration. VRE returned to the S Plus schedule on January 21st. On-time performance for the month of January was 92% system-wide, We had some weather-related delays in addition to some system congestion due to freight and Amtrak trains. The majority of VRE staff continues to work remotely. All business functions are fully operational, and we continue to maintain a continuity of operations. That's the end of my report, Madam Chair.
Okay, are there any questions for Mr. Dalton from Prince William County? Any questions from Stafford County,
None, thank you.
City of Manassas,
No questions, thank you.
Manassas Park,
No questions.
Fredericksburg?
Just want to pass on thanks to Rich for the information on the CSX tanker cars in Fredericksburg. Appreciate you being the intermediary on that one.
Absolutely, sir.
Spotsylvania,
No questions.
DRPT,
No questions.
General Assembly?
No
Okay.
questions.
All right, we'll now go into item 6.2, which is to authorize closed session of PRTC. Is there a motion to certify? I'm sorry, to authorize closed meeting?
Yes, Madam Chair, there is a motion to authorize a closed meeting for purposes of discussing potential acquisition of real property pursuant to 2.2-3711A3 of the state code, and you have a copy of that motion in your package.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second, Rick Angry.
Moved by Vice Chair Rischel, seconded by Supervisor Angry. Christine, will you please call the roll?
Victor Angry,
Aye.
Kenny Bodie,
Aye.
Margaret Franklin,
Aye.
Yesli Vega,
Aye.
Kalai Kandasamy,
Aye.
Benny Smith,
Aye.
Tanisha Allen,
Aye.
Cindy Shelton,
Aye.
Pam Sabeski,
Aye.
Jeanette Rischel,
Yes.
Matthew Kelly,
Aye.
Deborah Frazier,
Aye.
Gary Skinner,
Aye.
Jennifer DeBrule,
Aye.
Elizabeth Guzman,
Aye.
George Barker.
Aye.
Madam Chair, that resolution is approved.
Okay, Carl, you'll break us out.
Ma'am.
So be sure to look for an invite to join the breakout room.
Mr. Bodie, you should have received an invite to the breakout room. for the closed meeting session? Carl, can you please let Christine share her screen?
I'm not sure if I have that option now that she's in the room. Hold on one second.
I selected share screen, Carl.
Okay.
Christine, if you can let us know when you think everyone is back in the meeting and when it's the recorder's turn back on.
I've started recording again, and I will ask Carl and Doris to verify that the breakout room has been closed, which means that anybody who left that meeting is back in this meeting.
The room has been closed. They have not all returned, but should be shortly.
Madam Chair, if you want to proceed, you have in your package a motion to certify the closed meeting. Succinctly, that means that you only talked about those matters for which you properly went into closed meeting.
Is there a motion to certify closed meeting?
So moved.
So
Madam
moved,
Chair.
Supervisor Bodie.
Moved by Mayor Rischel. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Supervisor Bodie. Christine, will you please call the roll?
Victor Angry,
Aye.
Kenny Bodie,
Aye.
Margaret Franklin,
Aye.
Yesli Vega,
Aye.
Kalai Kandasamy,
Aye.
Benny Smith,
Aye.
Tanisha Allen,
Aye.
Cindy Shelton,
Aye.
Pam Sabeski,
Aye.
Jeanette Rischel,
Yes.
Matthew Kelly,
Aye.
Deborah Frazier,
Aye.
Gary Skinner,
Aye.
Jennifer DeBrule,
Aye.
Elizabeth Guzman,
Aye.
George Barker.
Aye.
Madam Chair, that resolution is approved.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if you would like, there's a resolution coming out of closed meeting for the commission's consideration. It will be in the record and available immediately. The resolution, as summarized, is to authorize a bona fide offer to purchase the land and improvements located in Prince William County at 10305 Piper Lane, AKA 10307 through 10367 Piper Lane, 10405 Piper Lane, and 10236 Residency Road, Manassas, Virginia, 20110, and in the city of Manassas at 10599 Residency Road, Manassas, Virginia, 20110, with the GPIN shown in the resolution for both the county and the city, consisting of 712,135 square feet, more or less, pursuant to section 25.1, of the Code of Virginia. It is property which is owned of record by Contractor Storage LLC.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
So moved, Madam Chair, Supervisor Bodie.
Second, Supervisor Angry.
Moved by Supervisor Bodie and seconded by Supervisor Angry. Christine, will you please call the roll?
Victor Angry,
Aye.
Kenny Bodie,
Aye.
Margaret Franklin,
Aye.
Yesli Vega,
Aye.
Kalai Kandasamy,
Aye.
Benny Smith,
Aye.
Tanisha Allen, Cindy Shelton,
Aye.
Pam Sabeski,
Aye.
Jeanette Rischel,
Yes.
Matthew Kelly,
Aye.
Deborah Frazier,
Aye.
Gary Skinner,
Aye.
Jennifer DeBrule,
Aye.
Elizabeth Guzman,
Aye.
George Barker.
Aye.
Madam Chair, that resolution is approved.
Okay. And I'm not sure if Mr. Dalton is here, but I see there are a few information items for your reference. We'll now move on to public comment time. Christine, were there any public comments that were submitted electronically?
Madam Chair, no one submitted comments for tonight's meeting.
With that, we'll move on to item 8, the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent items 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, and 8.5? And I'll just kind of read a summary of those, and then perhaps we can make a motion and then move into discussion. 8.2 is the acceptance of the PRTC monthly jurisdictional financial report. 8.3 is the authorization to submit Federal Transit Administration's fiscal year 2021 annual certifications and assurances. 8.4 is the authorization to submit FY22 state grant applications. And 8.5 is the authorization to extend PRTC's contract with Smart Maps, Inc. for the design and production of the bus schedules and bus stop information. Would anyone like to remove any of the items from the motion? If not, is there a motion to go into items 8.2 to 8.5?
I move that we agree to the consent agenda items.
Second from Rishel.
Moved by Mr. Skinner, seconded by Mayor Rishel. Is there discussion? And actually, I guess before we get into discussion, Mr. Schneider, would you like to make any comments?
Madam Chair, this is Gary Skinner. I think that was, motion was made by Senator Barker.
Oh,
Yes.
I'm sorry, my
Right.
apologies, Senator Barker. Thank you.
And Madam Chair, these would not normally be subject to discussion as consent items, but
Gotcha.
questions are appropriate.
Okay, all right. Any questions from Prince William County? Stafford County,
None.
Spotsylvania,
None.
Fredericksburg,
None.
City of Manassas,
None.
Manassas Park,
No questions.
DRPT,
No questions.
General Assembly. Okay.
No questions.
Okay. Christine, will you please call the roll?
Victor Angry,
Aye.
Kenny Bodie,
Aye.
Margaret Franklin,
Aye.
Yesli Vega,
Aye.
Kalai Kandasamy,
Aye.
Benny Smith,
Aye.
Tanisha Allen,
Aye.
Cindy Shelton,
Aye.
Pam Sabeski,
Aye.
Jeanette Rishel,
Yes.
Matthew Kelly,
Aye.
Deborah Frazier,
Aye.
Gary Skinner,
Aye.
Jennifer DeBrule,
I'm going to abstain.
Elizabeth Guzman,
Aye.
George Barker.
Aye.
Madam Chair, that resolution is approved.
Okay. We'll now move into item 9, the executive director's time, and I will turn it now to Mr. Schneider.
All right, there we go. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. For follow-up items, I provided a report from Keolis for review of operator schedules as requested, and I'm hopeful that addresses your concerns. Just as a reminder, if you haven't had a chance to read over that, please do, and let me know. I'm more than happy to answer any questions or steer questions to Keolis for that matter. From a housekeeping standpoint, our enabling statute requires fidelity bonds, which are layered on top of our officers and directors insurance. So for newer commissioners and alternates, we will need to obtain your signatures, which will be done electronically through DocuSign. So staff will be contacting those commissioners and alternates directly, and PRTC provides all the funding and bonds, but also maintains the records for compliance. So it's a brief housekeeping item. On the legislative front, there are several moving pieces. Federally, a few things of note. The House Committee on Transportation Infrastructure, Budget Reconciliation, the House Committee also known as T&I, also includes an additional $30 billion of COVID-19 emergency funding for public transit. On Monday, the House proposal to help transit survival through this bill will help prevent the massive labor cuts and drastic service reductions until we see growth in ridership fare revenue and stability in both state and local tax revenues. Of course, there's no certainty for passage of this amount, nor do we know the specific amount that PRTC would receive. However, considering the ongoing impact on the commuter rail and bus services especially, we are hopeful we'll have an opportunity to continue to manage resources throughout the recovery with this assistance. It did go through markup, I believe, yesterday, and cleared generally intact. A second federal act via executive order established a mask mandate on transit with enforcement and possible civil penalties via TSA. This is less about our region or even our services, but instead provides teeth to transit systems and localities or possibly the state or the local government has not really enforced a mask mandate. This provided teeth to the transit industry, who has been pretty aggressive as a whole, not just for the sake of masks for health reasons, but also to continue to attract ridership and demonstrate our success in maintaining a sanitary environment. While not in federal legislation, it does tie in with the mask mandate. We remain in a holding pattern regarding vaccines for especially our frontline employees. We've created a website for our employees under the OmniRide umbrella. So that's both PRTC as well as Keolis, in addition to our contracted security, as well as our subcontracted cleaning companies for both fleet and facility. So they're all eligible to enter. We share that information with them because not every employee wants to receive their alert through their work email. So we've given them the option for home versus work options in email and phone. And this also assists Keolis in helping them with their employees. They have many more names and numbers to manage. We also use this as a place to provide updated information about the vaccine, CDC guidelines, federal updates, and employee resources. So it's become a nice one-stop shop that helps employees as they continue to navigate the next phase of recovery. Next Friday, I, along with other transit leaders, will be meeting with Senator Warner at NVT offices to discuss the impacts of COVID-19 on our organizations. And we will be focused on the near-term impacts for drivers, passengers, and the organization as a whole, but also what the long-term effects may be for the industry, especially commuter services, as an organization that has built ourselves around key issues of throughput, fare recovery, and operational efficiency with a very low capital overhead. We've been doubly impacted by the pandemic, as most of the aid was tied to how much capital money you received, but then it didn't really directly offset fare recovery. So it's just a challenge for us. At the Commonwealth level, crossover between the House and the Senate occurred last Friday, and we're watching budget activity in a few key items. Several amendments were approved by the transportation subcommittees of House Appropriations and Senate Finance and Appropriations. We will track these as they move to conference committee later in the session, but a few of those items are: number one, funding included for a transit equity and modernization study to be conducted by DRPT. This amendment is not included in the Senate budget at this time, but did easily pass in the House and is at Rules Committee for the Senate. We expect that to find funding resource and have that completed. I will include a link to that amendment in the meeting recap minutes for tomorrow. The Senate approved amendments containing $5 million in FY 2021 funds from federal funding to support transit incentives focused on fare and congestion reduction programs, which is where we focus, especially on 66-995. We'll include a link there as well. And we continue to thank Senator Barker for his aggressive support of those issues as it directly relates not just us as an organization, but the region as an economy and as individuals who make up what is our footprint as citizens. As a note, there's also a language-only amendment in the Senate budget, which would waive the 25% cap on the transit ridership incentive program that allows for more funding for transit equity support reduction for those systems. For example, our local services where we're still continuing to operate fare-free. While not legislative, I will also be joining a group of transit CEOs within the Virginia Transit Association umbrella to review equity within our organization in terms of our services, our planning processes, and community outreach. This isn't an internal scrub of our individual agencies, but rather what are the challenges we face in creating equity, especially in services. A great example of that is when you look at our commuter services where we have a high rate of return on investment. We tend to invest more money in that because it costs less over time, whereas local services that have lower ridership may not receive the same attention, but the need for trips are sometimes the same, if not more. So I'll be joining with transit leaders from Richmond, Hampton Roads, and elsewhere across the Commonwealth to examine how we can help bridge that gap in our values versus what gets funded and ultimately delivered. It really is an exciting endeavor, and I'm proud to be asked. In very happy news, OmniRide is a finalist for the Prince William Chamber Awards for Outstanding Business. Our emphasis on response, resiliency, and adjustments has really helped lead the way in the community, and it's an honor to get this far. We will await announcement on the 25th. Hopefully we win. It is very exciting to get recognized, but it's truly a case of an entire organization that is pulled together in the same direction that's made the difference. And as always, the information pack attached at the back of your board agenda outlines our ridership safety performance, which was stellar during our most recent storm. The entire team did a great job from operations, safety, communications, and beyond. And we are bracing for yet another week of unknown weather. At this point, I'd like to hand it to Ms. Barbara Murdoch to give her update on some of the great things Keolis is doing.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. You will be receiving an invite next week to our first town hall meeting. It's scheduled for Sunday, February 21st at 2 p.m. This is a virtual informational meeting, and we've invited speakers as the PRTC Commission Chair, the PRTC Executive Director, Keolis Management, Union Representative, and of course, all our employees are invited. We're soliciting questions before this meeting, so if you have a topic to add to the agenda, please contact me or Dr. Schneider. So I hope you all can attend. As Dr. Schneider said, our operations team is right now preparing and monitoring the weather. The winter weather with rain and snow, is expected over the next few days. Our team is making sure our lots are sanded, buses start in extreme cold, and implementing safety measures for our employees and riders. We're implementing the PRTC mask wearing protocol. All customers are required to wear a mask. Refusals will be offered a mask and a policy explained by the driver. Further refusals involve contacting dispatchers and supervisors. And then beyond that is contacting the police. We're working on our 3-month relocation plan for the Western facility and also working on spring and summer run cuts and bids. That's it from Keolis.
Thank you so much. The last thing on the report is an industry article. This really ties into part of our budget discussion. As we move forward, we'll be discussing, for example, what our projected ridership and revenue and those types of items. This industry article, along with several others and the data sources that have come surrounding it, have helped inform us in terms of an approach of what we can expect. This is a survey conducted by the Greater Washington Partnership in 2 phases, and that just gives an indicator of large business responses of when they expect their employees to return to work. So it's not only time frame, but it's time frame, percent of workforce by size of employer, as well as approximate amount of time in the office. So that has helped really generate a lot of data and generate a lot of good discussion. So we'll be moving forward with that. So at this time, Madam Chair, that concludes my report unless there are questions.
Any questions from Prince William County?
Madam Chair, this is Supervisor Vega. I have a question.
Supervisor Vega.
Thank you. Bob, thank you for your presentation to our board this past Tuesday. And going along with some of the questions that I asked, I would like to request that you provide us with the average ridership per route. Would that be possible? And if so, what would be the turnaround for that request?
Yes, we're working through a dashboard right now. So we have some more recent data. I will probably, let me get back to you on that, and I'll just include that for the whole commission, either in tomorrow's response or next week. But we already have the ridership by route, but what we also have is the dashboard we're working on is doing it ranking and comparisons. So it gives kind of not just a what is it, but how does it fit in context, commuter versus local. So I will cut and carve that for you and we'll provide that update.
Great, thank you. I appreciate it. That's the only question I had, Madam Chair.
Okay, anyone else from Prince William County? Stafford County?
None.
Fredericksburg?
No questions.
Spotsylvania?
None.
City of Manassas? Manassas Park?
No questions.
DRPT?
No questions.
General Assembly?
No questions.
Okay, my only question, this I think is a Keolis question. There was a question at the last meeting with regards to how the runs are picked. And I think there was some information sent out via email about that, but was wondering if there was any comments about that.
In response to the information that was read at the last meeting, it was submitted to Dr. Schneider and it's included in the packet.
Okay, and then were we able to reach out to those individuals to kind of go over, how those runs have come about?
Yes, we spoke to them in December.
Okay, great. And then I know Mr. Skinner asked that question at the last month's meeting, but Mr. Skinner, just want to let you know, I think some of that information was emailed out, and we're happy to go over that if necessary. With that, we will move into item 10, presentations and information, starting with the I-395-95 commuter choice program. Dr. Schneider?
Yeah, so we have a brief presentation from Ben Owen, who's just going to provide an update on the I-395-95 commuter choice program, and then we will move into the proposed budget. Historically, we've provided the budget in terms of January report of revenues. This month would be expenditures because of the CARES funding and that information coming in. We pushed our budget presentation forward, so it'll actually be a full presentation of review of revenues as well as expenditures. So, and as if you recall, Christine sent out information to the commission for all the budget items. To flag your email, it was sent out Wednesday at 10:38 a.m. There's a big attachment that has about 10 slides, or not slides, but 10 different pages breaking down the jurisdictions. And then we've also provided a full line item that covers the budget proper in terms of last year over this year, the delta between the two, breaks it down in terms of fare box, grants, state grants, all the way down the line, and then separates it between administration, marketing, OmniRide, OmniLink, which is our localized service historically, paratransit, Vanpool, the TDM programs, and the total. So all of that information has already been provided. It's already on the website as well, but this is just a presentation for a high-level recap, and of course, questions afterward.
Mr. Owens?
Yes, good evening. Nice to be with you all again. I'll be short in my remarks. So the last time I was with you was in the fall as we were preparing to open our call for projects for commuter choice on the I-395-95 corridor round 2. We've now just closed our application period as of about 2 weeks ago. So tonight I'll give you a quick overview of the applications we received and the next steps in the process. So with your meeting materials, you have a list of the 18 applications we received. In a second, I'll show the full list in a slightly more graphical format. Overall, the total funding request among these 18 applications was $26.2 million. We do expect full funding of this 2-year program. This is covering fiscal years 22 and 23 of about $30 million. So potentially more money available than we had in requests. Generally, in terms of the revenue side of things, the 95 and 395 express lanes have been a bit more resilient during COVID times than some other toll facilities in the region, such as I-66. It's a long facility of roughly 40 miles with tolls collected at all times. We did just receive the second annual transit investment payment from the Commonwealth, actually from Transurban, the express lanes concessionaire via the Commonwealth, and that payment was made in full of $15.4 million. Did see potentially slightly dampened demand for funding. As you're aware, the market for new commuter services, which have kind of been the bread and butter of commuter choice in both of our corridors so far, still a challenging time for that, just given, commute travel has not quite rebounded to where it was before, still quite a bit lower in many cases. And we also work more closely up front with applicants to identify proposals that might be a good fit for the program. So $26.2 million in total requests. About 60% of that total request was from NVTC jurisdictions and transit providers. About 60% of the total number of applications were from PRTC jurisdictions and transit providers, including PRTC itself. I'll just note too, assuming we do allocate less money than we receive, the balance would remain for use in future programs. So for our round 3 call for projects in just under 2 years. Next slide, please. So shown here are the 18 proposals we received. They cover the full length of the corridor pretty nicely. There are several proposed continuations of transit services that were funded under the initial I-395-95 program, both OmniRide and Fairfax Connector services. A couple of pretty significant proposed local transit service expansions further north, particularly among Dash routes in the city of Alexandria. These would be all day, every day of the week improvements, which is allowable here since tolls are collected at all times. A few transportation demand management strategies, mostly around encouraging carpooling and van pooling for when interest in those means of travel starts to pick back up. A few park and ride lot projects in the southern portion of the corridor, and one proposed VRE feeder bus service in the southern portion of the corridor. So we are in the process at this time of reviewing 18 for eligibility and making sure we have all the needed information to be able to do the technical evaluation on them. Next slide, please. So in terms of what's coming up, the eligibility review is really the focus for this month. We'll be notifying any applicants with ineligible applications by the end of the month. We are coordinating this part of the review very closely with our Commonwealth partners at the Department of Rail and Public Transportation. They help us ensure that the proposals we advance align with the memorandum of agreement with the Commonwealth that governs the program. We are gradually getting clarification questions on the applications out around eligibility as well as information for evaluation. And at next month's meeting on March 4th, I will be back to present the list of eligible applications. So next month, really our focus is going to be on scoring all those eligible applications. Both the commissions adopted the technical evaluation process in November, so we'll be following that and making sure we're being consistent across all of our proposals. In April, we'll open a 1-month public comment period that'll be entirely online, soliciting input on the projects under consideration for funding. Also, the Joint Commission Working Group will meet that month to review the technical evaluation results and identify an approach to developing a program of projects for funding, subject to the public comment we receive. In May, we'll brief the full commissions and the Commonwealth Transportation Board on the projects under consideration for funding, including their scores and the proposed programming approach, and we'll wrap up public comment mid-month. And then in June, adoption of the program of projects by the commissions, and then the CTB for adoption into the 6-year improvement program. And once that happens, we will distribute project agreements for the funded projects so that the implementation of those can start with the new fiscal year on July 1st. Next slide, please. So with that, I will close. I'll be back with you again on March 4th. And for now, I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Owens. Are there any questions from Prince William County? Stafford County?
None, thank you very much.
City of Manassas?
None, thank you.
Manassas Park?
None, thank you.
Fredericksburg?
No questions.
Spotsylvania? DRPT?
No questions.
No questions from DRPT.
General Assembly?
No questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Owens. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll now move into item 10.2, the proposed budget and review of revenues presentation. Dr. Schneider, we will turn it over to you. And just for those new to the commission, this is a proposed budget. It's meant for discussion amongst your jurisdictions. And obviously it's meant to evolve in a sense if necessary. So that's not something we're voting on tonight. It's just a presentation. And later we'll have a motion to actually refer to the individual jurisdictions to come back with feedback. So with that, Dr. Schneider, I'll turn it over to you and maybe just give an overview of how the budget process works for PRTC.
Yes. So what we do is we start our process all the way back in December with projections based on motor fuels tax collections, revenue projections, ridership projections, as well as what we intend to apply for in terms of grants. Our grant application process, as you just heard from Mr. Owen, is full underway for different services as well as state funded programs etc. So all of that helps build into the big picture of the budget for both operating and capital expenses. And then the department utilizes a zero-based budget, meaning they don't just take what they did last year and tack on a percent. We start from the ground up of how many hours of service, which routes, what will be the projected fuel, what are the actual costs. So rather than just take a build upon what we did last year number, we do zero-based budgeting so that we have an accurate reflection of what it takes to get the work done and to do it with success. So at this point, I'd like to hand it over to Joyce Embry, our Director of Finance, who will provide an overview.
Hey, good evening. Tonight, I am presenting the FY 2022 proposed PRTC budget. After the presentation, the board will be asked to approve Agenda Item 11.1, which authorizes the transmittal of the budget to the jurisdictions for approval. Here are the major challenges we considered as we prepared the FY 22 budget. COVID-19 impacts, which started being felt in March 2020, continue into FY 21 and FY 22. Impacts have been felt on bus service and ridership levels and fare box revenue. After reducing express bus service March 25th, 2020, and again April 27th, 2020, PRTC increased express bus service on June 22nd, 2020 to Friday-only service, which continues. 3 grant-funded routes were suspended November 30th, 2020, the Dale City and Lake Ridge Mark Center routes and Tysons, due to extremely low ridership. There have been no changes in service for Metro Express, Local, East-West Express, and Access. Average ridership is at 42% pre-pandemic of normal service. We continue to incur costs for goods and services such as PPE, hand sanitizer, additional cleanings, etc., to mitigate risks. We have assumed additional funding from the second round of federal CARES Act funding to help close the gap in the FY 22 budget. We received the occupancy permit for the Western Maintenance Facility in September 2020. We anticipate operating Western service out of the new facility starting this spring. The bus contractor rate is currently being negotiated to reflect current service levels and operating service out of 2 facilities. Here is the FY 22 budget broken down between operating and capital. 40.8 million operating and 11.1 million capital, for a total budget of 51.9 million. The following slides will go into more details. Here is a comparison of the FY 21 budget and the FY 22 budget. There is a decrease of 1.5 million in operating expenses and 300,000 in capital expenses for an overall decrease of 1.8 million compared to the FY 21 budget. You will notice that passenger revenue drops 5.3 million from FY 21, which is a combination of reduced ridership, former passengers still working remote, as well as Friday-only service for express routes, and continued free fares for Metro Express, Local, East-West Express, and Access. This drop in passenger revenue is offset primarily by increased federal funding of 5.4 million. Jurisdictional subsidies dropped by 2.2 million for both operating and capital from FY 21. The decrease in operating expenses are primarily in bus service contract and fuel categories due to Friday-only express service levels. Capital expense levels stayed about the same. This slide shows the major revenue categories and the percentage makeup of the budget. For the FY 22 budget, passenger revenue is accounting for 5.51 million, or approximately 14% of the operating budget. In FY21, passenger revenue covered approximately 26% of the operating budget. Federal and state grants account for 45% of operating and 92% of capital in FY22. In FY21, federal and state grants account for 32% of operating and 80% of capital. Jurisdictional subsidies account for 41% of operating and 8% of capital in FY22 as well as FY21. Regarding revenue assumptions, for passenger revenue, we have assumed no fare increase in FY22. Fares will continue to be free for Metro Express, Local, East-West Express, and Access. Revenue from ridership is estimated at 47% compared to pre-COVID levels. The graph shows farebox revenue history from July 2018 to December 2020. You will notice the significant drop of revenue in April 2020 due to COVID. Revenue has increased slightly over the last few months as ridership has increased as some passengers return to their offices. For federal grants, Section 5307 funding, which is urbanized area formula funding, we have assumed relatively steady funding for preventive maintenance, including Vanpool Alliance program earnings. For Section 5337 funding, which is state of good repair funding, there is continued loss of high-intensity motor bus funding due to opening of hot lanes. So this funding has been going down. Once the I-66 HOV lanes become toll lanes, which is around 2023, the funding will go away, which will impact the FY25 budget. Section 5339 funding, which is bus and bus facilities formula funding, must be used for vehicle purchase instead of preventive maintenance. For federal CARES Act funding, PRTC was allocated $9.3 million in the first round. We applied for $8.4 million, setting aside $900,000 to be applied for later for contingencies and other programs. There are two components, direct expenses, which is like the PPE, sanitizer, making salaries whole for the operators and mechanics when service was reduced, additional cleanings, that type of thing. And then reimbursement of operating expenses less other revenue sources. So through June 30, 2020, those amounted to $2.6 million. And from July 1st through October 31st, there's been an additional $1.4 million. So we estimate the remaining $4.4 million from the first round of funding will last through July 31st, 2021. The second round of CARES Act funding was approved at the end of December 2020. PRTC is working with WMATA through the regional process to determine what PRTC will receive in the second round. We have assumed $4.3 million in the FY22 budget. For state grants, DRPT operating assistance for FY21 is $5.3 million. We have assumed a decrease of 4% or a total of $5.1 million in the FY22 budget. For capital assistance, there's 68% for vehicle purchases and 0% for other capital, which means it's 100% locally funded, and that's for hardware, software, furniture, equipment. We have assumed continued support from the Commuter Choice Program for currently funded service. For the operating carry forward, there's $1.4 million from FY20 available to support the FY22 budget by reducing the PRTC subsidy payment. We apply residual amounts from the end of a fiscal year to help support the ensuing budget cycle. In this case, fiscal 20 residual to help support FY22. Jurisdictional staff are aware of this process and are supportive. We have updated fuel tax revenue projections for FY21 and FY22. Fuel tax revenue for FY20 was 7% less than FY19. Consumption went from 512 million gallons to 475.5 million gallons. We have assumed consumption will remain flat in FY21 and will grow by 0.3% in FY22. We base our projections on statewide forecasts provided by the principal economist at the Virginia Department of Taxation. As you are aware, motor fuels tax revenue is reduced by PRTC's share of the Commuter Rail Operating and Capital Fund, CROC, based on PRTC's percentage of the VRE subsidy, which is 63.1% or $9.47 million for FY22. For the two jurisdictions that most recently had fuel tax fund balance issues, we anticipate that Prince William and Manassas will retain a positive fuel tax fund balance through FY22. This slide shows the major expense categories and the percentage makeup of the budget. For the FY22 budget, salaries and fringes make up almost 15% of the operating budget. The bus service contract makes up 61% and fuel almost 7%. Those four line items make up about 83% of the total operating budget. For service assumptions, we have assumed Friday-only service levels for the express bus service for all of FY22, which represents about 85% of service. All other bus service levels remain the same. Expansion of service is only what is funded by other sources such as DRPT and the Commuter Choice Program. We have assumed that the current funding will remain in FY22 for grant-funded services that PRTC is currently providing. We are including a contingency of 6 daily platform hours to allow for schedule adjustments. Here are the major expense assumptions. The bus contractor rate for FY22 is in process of being negotiated to account for bus service operating out of 2 facilities and current service levels. We have made some assumptions about the rate in the budget. We have estimated $400,000 for operating costs for the Western facility in FY22, which will be the first full year in the facility. There are no new FTEs in FY22. We have assumed 3% COLA merit, as well as $150,000 to implement the compensation study recommendations. We have included $150,000 for Wheels to Wellness, which Prince William County is funding through non-fuel tax sources. We have included $150,000 for electric bus feasibility study, funded 50% by the state and 50% by the bus sponsoring jurisdictions. We have included $117,000 for diversity, equity, and inclusion study recommendations for consulting and training. The fuel budget has dropped $495,000 from FY21 due to the reduced bus service levels, resulting in fewer gallons consumed. Based on current service levels, we estimate 1.3 million gallons at $2 a gallon. We recently acquired fuel futures through our fuel supplier for FY22, which will cover approximately 74% of the fuel. The remainder of the fuel will be purchased at rack pricing. Capital expenditures in total have remained about the same as FY21. Bus replacement and expansion are about $10 million of the $11 million capital budget, or 89% of the capital budget. Bus replacements include 11 express buses, 7 funded with CMAQ, which is federal and state funding, and no local funding, and 4 express buses funded by federal at 80%, the state at 16%, and local at 4%, which is Prince William County. Bus expansion includes 5 buses, 4 express and 1 local, 100% funded by commuter choice. The expansion buses will not be purchased until ridership levels return. Here are the jurisdictional subsidies comparing FY21 and FY22. Overall subsidies have dropped by $2.2 million, or 11% compared to FY21. Prince William County's is the largest financial change in subsidy, a reduction of $2.12 million, which is primarily due to the reduction of commuter service. For the non-bus sponsoring jurisdictions, the administrative subsidies went down, which is allocated based on the jurisdiction's respective share of the overall fuel tax revenue, which is based on the founding ordinance. Spotsylvania's share of fuel tax increased by 2 percentage points from FY21 to FY22, so the net subsidy reduction is less for Spotsylvania than Stafford and Fredericksburg. This graph shows the fuel tax fund balance history for the member jurisdictions from FY 1995 to FY 2020. It does not show projected fund balance for June 30, 21 and June 30, 22. Prince William County's has had the most dramatic ups and downs. The ups and downs are reflective of the amount of fuel tax revenue earned versus the amount spent on subsidies and other transportation projects. And there's a lot going on in the slide with the 6 jurisdictions, but the information is in your packet if you want to review it more. Next steps. Tonight, the board will be asked with agenda item 11.1 to authorize the transmittal of the PRTC FY22 budget to the jurisdictions for approval. The resolution does not adopt the budget. It is to transmit to the jurisdictions. Public hearings will be scheduled in the spring for the budget and federal grant applications. The jurisdictions will approve the budget and subsidies in the April-May timeframe, and we will come back to the board at the June Commission meeting for approval of the FY22 budget. Madam Chair, I'm happy to entertain questions.
All right, and before we get into questions, just again, want to reiterate what was just stated. This is to refer the budget to our jurisdictions for us to consider internally. There obviously will be public hearings on this budget. So this is not something that we are voting on tonight. So I just want to make sure that everyone is clear about that. Are there any questions from Prince William County?
No questions.
Okay, and I'll save my questions to the end. Stafford County?
No questions.
Spotsylvania?
Yes, I got one question, please.
Yes, sir.
I was looking at the fiscal year 22 proposed budget on, I don't know if you can see this, but I'll try to hold it up. This is what the page I'm on. Okay. And I noticed that I'm going from fiscal year 21 to fiscal year 22. 26,436,900 for fiscal 21. Fiscal year 22 was 26,544. I'm just wondering, and if I go down below, it says jurisdiction percent are based on their share of fiscal year 22 PRTC net fuel revenue. And then difference in the fiscal 21 budget is $907,000. My question is, where does the $907,000 come from? Where did we get that figure from? Because the difference. No, you know what? It's okay. I think I see what the difference is. No. Yeah, if you look at the fiscal 20 year budget, I'm going to $5.5 million. So where does the 907 come down, the difference in the fiscal 21 budget come from?
Joyce, I believe that is on of the PDF of the 11.1 attachment FY22 budget, page 2, under the percentages. I believe that is the reapportionment of the motor fuels tax where Spotsylvania is now collecting a larger proportional percentage.
Bob, I can understand that, but I guess what I'm trying, these are the attachments you sent us prior to
Yes, sir.
this meeting. So not my concern, my question is, how did we get $907,000 as a difference in fiscal year 21 budget? I take it's a difference from 21 to 22.
No, actually, Commissioner Skinner, what it is in the 21 budget, Spotsylvania was assumed when we originally did the revised 21 budget. Spotsylvania's fuel tax revenue was estimated at $4,570,700.
Right.
We revised our projections for FY21 as part of the FY22 budget process. And based on that, we anticipate Spotsylvania's revenue will actually be $5,477,700 in FY21, which results in the increase of $907,000. So that's just an increase in the projection for Spotsylvania. It's a revised FY21 projection.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, and just a little bit of history and context on that. We did not know what the impact would be on the motor fuels tax once the pandemic hit. And the original projections, Joyce backed me up on this. We had a conference call with the state economic forecaster, and they were expecting 30–40% reductions, and that did not pan out. And so what that is that's recasting the projections based on actual numbers and then updated information. And I believe DRPT has echoed this general sentiment in that projections that they thought they would see in some loss areas have not been as bad, and they've adjusted their own forecasts at the budget level or at the state level. So that's just recasting that projection.
Okay, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Fredericksburg,
No questions.
DRPT,
No questions.
General Assembly.
No questions.
Okay, my only question is with regards to reserves, if the budget takes into account the potential to have to use any reserves that may exist.
At this time, the budget does not include any use of reserves.
Okay, so the budget right now as stands is pretty much a projection of, because the worst case scenario would be that we will have to dip into reserves. So right now that remains untouched with this particular budget.
That is correct. The key being that we did reduce services to minimize the overall expenses that the jurisdictions would incur to try to preserve as much of the fund balance as possible. And hopefully we'll continue to see additional CARES funding.
Okay. All right, there are no more questions about that. We'll move into item 11, which is to authorize to refer the PRTC proposed budget to the local jurisdictions. Is there a motion?
So moved by Mr. Skinner.
Moved by Mr. Skinner. Is there a second?
Second, Ms. Shelton.
Seconded by Supervisor Shelton, I believe. Okay. Is there a discussion from Prince William County? Stafford County?
No questions.
Sorry. City of Manassas?
No questions.
Manassas Park?
None, thank you.
Fredericksburg?
No questions.
Spotsylvania?
No questions.
DRPT?
No questions.
And the General Assembly. Okay.
Questions.
Christine, will you call the roll?
Victor Angry,
Aye.
Kenny Bodie,
Aye.
Margaret Franklin,
Aye.
Yesli Vega, Kalai Kandasamy,
Aye.
Benny Smith,
Aye.
Tanisha Allen,
Aye.
Cindy Shelton,
Aye.
Pamela Sebeski,
Aye.
Jeanette Rischel,
Yes.
Matthew Kelly,
Aye.
Deborah Frazier,
I believe Deborah lost the internet. She emailed me.
thank you. Gary Skinner,
Aye.
Jennifer DeBrule,
Aye.
Elizabeth Guzman, is Delegate Guzman still with us? Okay, I don't hear a vote from Delegate Guzman. George Barker.
Aye.
Madam Chair, that resolution is approved.
Okay. All right, we will now move into item 11.2, which is the authorization to issue an invitation for bids for maintenance of bus stops and shelters. This is a resolution to issue an IFB for maintenance and repair of PRTC owned bus stops and shelters. Mr. Schneider? Dr. Schneider?
Okay, thought I hit unmute. With permission, I can just provide the update for 11.2 through 11.4 and just put them all at one, just for expediting along.
That would be
These
good.
are
Thank
for
you.
these are for maintenance of stops and shelters, and the uniqueness between, you're like, aren't these the same thing? One is for maintenance for stops and shelters that we own. Separately is for trash collection, as there are a number of locations we may not own the trash can or the facility, yet we pay to maintain it simply because maybe it's an example would be a school placed the trash can there, but it's next to a bus stop. That's a for instance, or maybe it's a city-owned waste receptacle, but because we have a stop there, that's what attracts a lot of that. So that's why they are separate items, and the contracts are just due to go out for bid as they're expiring. And then the final item is a resolution to authorize me to send letters for support for regional transportation projects for both FAMPO as well as Arlington's TDM program. Those letters have already been issued, but procedurally, I come back to you retroactively to bless that decision, which leads into the item under 12.1 that gives an exemplar of procedurally why that may be an item of change. But so your options are, Madam Chair, to bundle for a singular vote 11.2, 3, or 4 for one vote, or we can keep them separate. It is your discretion.
Madam Chair, I motion that we move items 11.2 through 11.4 forward.
I second from Rischel.
Okay, moved by Supervisor Angry, seconded by Vice Chair Rischel. There discussion from Prince William County,
Nope.
Stafford County,
No discussion.
City of Manassas, Manassas Park,
None.
Fredericksburg,
None.
Spotsylvania,
No questions.
DRPT,
No questions.
and General Assembly.
No questions.
Okay, Christine, will you please call the roll?
Victor Angry,
Aye.
Kenny Bodie,
Aye.
Margaret Franklin,
Aye.
Yesli Vega, I didn't hear a vote from Yesli Vega.
Aye.
Thank you. Kalai Kandasamy,
Aye.
Benny Smith,
Aye.
Tanisha Allen,
Aye.
Cindy Shelton,
Aye.
Pamela Sebeski,
Aye.
Jeanette Rischel,
Yes.
Matthew Kelly,
Aye.
Deborah Frazier,
Aye.
Gary Skinner,
Aye.
Jennifer DeBrule,
Aye.
and George Barker.
Aye.
Madam Chair, that resolution is approved.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll move into Chair's time, item 12. First is 12.1, delegating administrative powers and duties to the Executive Director. And I will let Dr. Schneider explain a little bit more, but It delegates additional administrative powers and duties to the executive director, including submitting applications for external funding, executing deeds of easement for utilities and incidental purposes, issue of IFBs and RFPs, as we just mentioned, and issue letters of support for projects beneficial to the region's transportation infrastructure. And all of these activities will be reported to the commission. And might I add, and I think Dr. Schneider understands this, that this is not something to just, that we're painting with a broad stroke. These items are still to be discussed with the commission. This is done more so for some time crunches that we've had between having to make decisions and when the board actually meets. So this is why we're recommending going in this direction, but it does not give him any executive powers that we ourselves have in terms of voting on some of these items, but I'll let Dr. Schneider express this a little bit more.
Madam Chair, this is Gary Skinner. I'll be leaving. I've got to attend to a couple people. My wife is sick, so.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Skinner. And
Thank
Dr.
you.
Schneider, before you start, Christine, just want to make sure that we still have a quorum. I believe Delegate Guzman is no longer with us, and when Mr. Skinner leaves, that will be a reduction.
We still do have a quorum, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Schneider.
Thank you. I'm leaving.
Yes. Over the past about 6 months, we've brought 10 separate items to you that we've had to either ask retroactively or have delayed moving things forward. Examples would be application for state grants. Just this list that you see on your screen are just those things, and it can delay things procedurally. Just whereas I have authority to spend up to $100,000, VRE has a similar authorization, and we provide to you in your information packet an actual listing of all instances when that occurs. We would modify that report and just list out and provide copies of any letters, for example, that we would issue and support. But for example, in tonight's agenda items 11.2 and 11.3 and 11.4 would be informational items updating the commission as opposed to action items specifically, and we would already have been starting our process for invitation to bid. Should those need to be those contracts need to be executed because they do exceed the spending thresholds, then that would come back to the board. If it did not, we would still report to the board just as we always have. We might issue an RFP in September, and then I might execute the contract in March. We would just provide this information to you as it occurs, as opposed to presenting it to you and then not reporting back until something in writing. So it keeps all the powers of the board intact. It just allows us to move forward on this. And again, I am beholden to the board. So if there are easements, procedural items like that, of course, we use legal services, et cetera, and I'm to be held accountable for those actions I take.
Okay, thank you. Actually, if there's a motion, then we can go into discussion. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve, Shelton.
Motion by Supervisor Shelton. Is there a second?
Second, Vic Angry.
Seconded by Supervisor Angry. Is there discussion from Prince William County? Stafford County?
No questions.
City of Manassas?
No questions.
Manassas Park?
None, thank you.
Fredericksburg?
No questions.
Spotsylvania?
No questions.
DRPT?
No questions.
General Assembly?
No questions.
Okay, Christine, will you please call the roll?
Victor Angry,
Aye.
Kenny Bodie,
Aye.
Margaret Franklin,
Aye.
Yesli Vega,
Aye.
Kalai Kandasamy,
Aye.
Benny Smith.
Aye.
Tanisha Allen,
Aye.
Cindy Shelton,
Aye.
Pamela Sebeski,
Aye.
Jeanette Rischel,
Yes.
Matthew Kelly,
Aye.
Deborah Frazier,
Aye.
Gary Skinner. Oh, sorry, Jennifer DeBrule,
Aye.
and George Barker.
Aye.
Madam Chair, that resolution is approved.
Okay, great. The only other thing I will share under chair's time, which is technically, I guess, items 13 for other business, the 2021 commission meeting calendar. It's my understanding that we're back on our regular schedule of the first Thursday of each month. Dr. Schneider, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And will that, Christine will call the roll, and if you have anything to say or any updates, you'll give that. If not, you can pass.
Victor Angry,
Pass. Kenny
Bodie,
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone as always for a great meeting. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Christine, and everyone else. I like the direction that generally the budget is going. I like the fact that we're trying to restore some of the things that we couldn't last year as a result of COVID. I'm looking forward for a good, robust budget season. Thank you so much. Have a good night, everyone.
Yesli Vega,
Pass.
Kalai Kandasamy.
Pass.
Is Kim Short still with us?
Pass.
Okay. Benny Smith,
Pass.
Tanisha Allen,
Pass.
Cindy Shelton,
Pass.
Pamela Sebeski,
Pass.
Ralph Smith,
Pass.
Jeanette Rischel,
Pass.
Alana Mensing. All right, I guess she's already left us. Daryl Moore. Okay. Matthew Kelly,
Pass.
Deborah Frazier,
Pass.
Jennifer DeBrule,
Pass.
and George Barker.
Just very briefly, we're about 2.5 weeks away from being through with our legislative session. As was referenced earlier by Dr. Schneider, we have just released the House and Senate budgets yesterday, and we'll adopt those officially tomorrow and then get things resolved. There are some initiatives already on the table in terms of a good bit of transportation stuff. We're seeing very good signs overall to restoration of ridership on some of the transit systems. So we're making progress, and the outlook over time, over this calendar year, looks like it's going to be pretty good by the end of the year. We are also seeing tremendous benefit in terms of the passenger rail services that we have. We've just come up with about $250 million in the Senate budget to extend increase rail service to Roanoke, and then extend it from Roanoke down to, this is all the way from Washington, D.C. to Roanoke, and then extend it further down to Christiansburg, not far from Virginia Tech. So we're doing a lot of things there. And actually, in the line that we have, the trains that we have going between Washington, D.C. and Roanoke, the operating costs are fully covered by fares, which is a very good sign and better than what you see around most places in the country. So we're developing a lot of things that do have a lot of passenger and transit types of things, and we're going to keep working at it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Madam Chair, that concludes Commissioner's time.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us tonight for this very special episode. But if there's a motion to adjourn, we can get on.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
Second,
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
See you guys next month. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Good night.
Night.